Hello, Elwood staff. Um, this, I'm not going to promise, is going to be the most exciting thing that you will see all day today, unfortunately, but it is something that we are required by law to provide for you. So, those of you who were with us last year will recognize the subject matter because it is much the same as last year, but we are required to go over this as professional development each year with our staff. That includes teachers, paraprofessionals, support staff like nurse, counselors, librarians, our administrative staff. Pretty much everybody has to be in the know on this. So that is why I am sending this out to you and requiring that you watch it and then come sign for your participation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. I want to go through this presentation with you as quickly as possible. And like I said, for many of you, this will be a repeat from last year, but it's still really good information to have. And sometimes it's not the worst thing to kind of re-up our knowledge on procedures and what to look for. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about McKinney Vento requirements regarding identification, recognition, and support for our homeless youth and our homeless students. So the first important thing to identify and define is, who is homeless? What does that mean? A lot of times when we think homeless, we think of, people living under underpasses or, begging for money on the street, that sort of thing. In this case, a homeless person is a student that is lacking a fixed and regular adequate nighttime residence. So we have students in our building right now that we know perfectly well are either crashing with friends or different family members that are not their legal guardian, things of that nature. And so sometimes for the purposes of school identification, the word homeless can mean a little bit more than what we usually think of it as. Okay. And obviously you guys can look at the slides as we go. I don't need to read them to you. You're perfectly capable of reading. At least I hope so. Okay. So continuing on with that idea, there is no set time limit for homelessness. If we have a student that appears to be homeless at this time, there isn't a time limit set to that. So sometimes this can go on for quite some time, and sometimes it's a blip on the radar. Sometimes people find themselves without a roof over their head for a very short amount of time until they can figure out some sort of situation that works for them. So, there is no specific guideline in terms of a time frame of how long this can be. I also wanted to point out, because we do have quite a few students in the Elwood school system who are either currently or awaiting foster care, and this does not include those students. So considering doubled up, the idea of doubled up, that is individuals who are unable to maintain their housing situation and are forced to stay with varying friends, family members, other persons. We deal with this a lot, especially at the junior, senior high school. With older kids, we tend to have kids who have recognized that their housing situation is maybe not the best for them and have sought other alternatives instead. So again, coming back to the idea of, is this by necessity or by choice? So for some of our kids, they choose to move out of a perfectly fine household in order to go somewhere else, versus some of them by necessity end up moving in with someone else in order to obtain safety and a roof over their head. Okay. Unaccompanied youth are youth who are not in the physical custody of a legal parent or guardian. Okay. We do have students that qualify under this definition as well, especially this year. I can think of a couple off the top of my head right now. So again, whether it's necessity or by choice, you must have fixed, adequate, and regular housing. Okay. Other things to consider: sometimes we have people who, either they're crashing in a workspace, maybe they own a family business, and things, especially right now with the COVID-19 epidemic, we have a lot of families who are small business owners who have obviously suffered some great financial losses. It is highly likely that some of these families would, rather than losing their business and their livelihood, would choose to lose their home in order to try and save the business. And in that case, they may very well decide to start living within the business, maybe in a back storage room, something along those lines, in order to keep a roof over their head. That is not a primary residence for living. So they would still be considered homeless even though they have a roof over their head. It is a roof that is not intended to be residential. So other things to keep in mind, okay? Obviously cars, buses, public places, things of that nature would also qualify. Okay, so for our specific school, we have a couple of different people that you can contact in order to ask questions if you are uncertain about whether a child would qualify under the McKinney Vento Act for protections based on homelessness. For our entire district, your go-to person would be Sherry Kripe. She's the Director of Learning at the Home Office. Her phone number and email are listed here. And then also for our particular building, that would be Dr. Troy Friedersdorf, the principal. Talisha Glassburn is also fairly experienced with situations of this nature. They are both here at the junior-senior building. And then I have included Talisha's email there, but then you should also have Troy Friedersdorf's email in order to contact him should it be necessary. Obviously, this is Heather, and obviously you can contact me as well. There's just only so much room on these slides. Okay, so for now, for our particular school district, and again, I stress to you, and I can't stress to you enough, with the COVID-19 pandemic the way that it is right now, I have absolutely no doubt that we have multiple students whose living situations within the last couple of months have definitely changed, and it's very likely that we don't even know about that yet. Again, we're still getting to know our kids and build relationships, build trust. So these are the types of things that usually come out in terms of either they will share it in a conversation, an email, sometimes in a writing assignment, for instance, personal narrative, something like that, or in a journal entry. So things to keep an eye on. But as of right now, we know that we have over 17 students in our district that have been officially identified as homeless. Madison County data reports over 350 homeless children. So it is highly, highly likely if that's the number in Madison County, then our numbers are obviously much higher than we even know. So again, it points to the importance of being able to identify students because many times they will not identify themselves. Okay. So recognizing signs, the idea here is that there's certain things that we as educators can pick up on because of the time that we have students within our building. So when they are here between 7 and 8 hours a day, we have opportunities to notice things that might be pointers towards identifying them as potentially being homeless, okay? So we have lack of educational continuity, and I'll let you look through, many of those bullet points. These are all things that, one single thing out of this list might not seem, super concerning. But if a student has quite a few of these things where we can start looking through this list and saying, Johnny has this, and Johnny's not able to do this, and when I contact home, nobody answers for Johnny. Things of that nature, those start to add up very quickly, and so sometimes it's worth going ahead and putting a bug in someone's ear in terms of maybe looking into that a little bit further to find out if maybe there's something that we need to do for that child. Again, the goal is always to eliminate the disruption to the student's education while experiencing homelessness. The majority of our students would not want that to be publicly known information, and many students will go to far lengths in order to cover up the fact that they are struggling at home. And usually it is because they are trying to protect their parents or their guardian, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But remember, as educators, it is always our job to, number one, notice these things, and again, alert the proper person if we are concerned. And number two, to make sure that while that is happening, that we provide them the steadiest education possible. Okay, so again, some more bullet points of things that may come about for a student that, again, when these things start adding up, they become concerning. So, a kid, obviously right now, incomplete or missing homework, that's, I can't help but laugh because that's about 95% of our students right now. So, but you know what I mean. A student that, typically speaking, has been a steady student and then all of a sudden takes a dive. I can think of one right off the top of my head right now. If that's the case, then it might be an alarm to something bigger happening, not just, ignoring homework or just not doing it. there may be a bigger problem at play. Okay. Something else in terms of transportation and attendance. We have a lot of students right now with numerous absence problems. If you notice that a student is, here for 1 or 2 days a week, but then missing the other 2 or 3 days a week, that's a significant issue. Could point to something being a problem in terms of that student being able to get here to school, or perhaps there is some sort of problem at home, or a lack thereof, to be able to get to school on time. That inability to contact parents, that's another big one. Right now, as we have probably contacted home more often than we ever have in the history of schooling, given what we're going through right now. If a parent will not ever call back, won't respond to anything, doesn't answer phone calls, voicemails, emails, is dodging Jamie if we send him to the home, those are obviously big red flags that something is definitely not right. So it is our job to ensure that they have equal access to every support provided in school that every other student does. So things to keep in mind. Another indicator would be poor health and nutrition. Some of our students, we can unfortunately smell them across the room. Sometimes that's just laziness, and sometimes it's because there's no water at their house. Sometimes it's because there's no house to have water at. So again, things along the way that you just need to keep track of. If you have a concern about a specific student, start jotting some notes down, start keeping a closer eye on that student for a few days, see what you can notice, and then go ahead and let one of us know that you have concerns and what those concerns are so that we can follow up for you. Okay. Again, a lot of the same things before. And again, everything in this bullet list here, some of this is just from laziness. Sometimes kids wear the same clothes every day because that's what they want to wear, and they're being difficult. Some kids just really smell because they're going through puberty, and so they're just particularly stinky. Typically speaking, we can usually recognize the difference between someone who is unable to clean themselves or their clothing versus someone who just doesn't want to. So again, things to keep in mind. Social and behavioral concerns. And again, we see a lot of these things between the junior and senior high school. 7th and 8th grade is such a transition time for a lot of these kids in terms of their behavior and the way that they react, especially to each other and to adults. But that being said, the longer you work in education, the more you recognize the differences between the normal progression versus someone who has had a very dramatic shift in their behavior, and it doesn't seem to be something coming from school itself or from someone at school themselves. So little things along the way here to keep in mind, things to notice. And again, I urge you that if there is a student that you are definitely concerned about, start jotting those things down so that you have a really good list to be able to share with one of us when you choose to reach out to us about that student, so that we have that information to work off of. And again, some behavior and social concerns in terms of being aggressive, some phobias, delays, a lot of anxiety. I brought it up earlier, but the idea of being overly protective of parents, unfortunately, that is a situation of many students who are experiencing homelessness at the time, do not blame their parents and in fact want to protect their parents because they know that if the wrong people find out, that it could mean trouble for them. I apologize for my phone ringing in the background. So they know that it could be troublesome for their parents, and they most certainly don't want to be taken away from their parents or put into the foster care system. And for many students, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And so that rather than turn their parents in to say, hey, we don't have a house and I'm living in a car and, this is terrible. Instead, they want to cover for them and make excuses and try to cover this up instead. So little things to kind of keep an eye out for. And a lot of times these things go hand in hand with not being able to get a hold of a parent and so on and so forth. So for parents, guardians, and even students sometimes, I ran into this today actually. when you ask a parent about, what is your current address, and you're trying to establish correct information for being able to contact some parents, if you get a lot of pushback immediately, or a defense mechanism of some kind, or in fact they try to tell you that they're not really sure what their address is because they just moved in, things of that nature, those are usually red flags that something is not right. Whether they're embarrassed about their current housing situation or whether they do not have a current housing situation is something that would need to be looked into. So again, something to be cognizant of. If you notice that some of these things, make sure you're jotting them down. Some different statements. We've been moving around a lot. I can't remember our new address. We're going through a bad time right now. Those are really nice, polite ways of saying some things that maybe are not so great. So again, if a student were to share something like this with you, or within a parent conversation, this gets shared with you, please keep that in mind, take note, and let us know if it's something that we need to follow up on. Okay, so for our school district and our community resources that are available to us nearby, there are a handful listed here. Bountiful Harvest Ministries is a transitional home that's located in Alexandria, so that's very close nearby. There are 2 in Anderson, the Christian Center and Alternatives Incorporated, and then also in Anderson, the Exodus House. There are also some new up-and-coming resources that have begun to pop up here in Elwood and in the immediate surrounding areas. That might definitely be worth pursuing, that I need to do a little bit further work on in order to figure out if it's something that would be available to our students or not. So more info on that to come. Okay, so action steps. Again, and I said this before, but limiting disruption to a student's education is always the priority. It does not matter what the concerns are. It doesn't matter how extensive they are. Our goal as educators is always to limit the disruption to a student's education as number one, okay? That means that no matter what the problems are, immediate enrollment in school, getting kids started in school, and providing them equal access to their education is absolutely paramount. Also, for monetary issues such as meals, textbooks, student fees, field trip money, that sort of thing. Those are things that usually can be worked on, and so it simply needs to be brought to the attention of the people that can help them. In this case, usually either Sherry Kripe, myself, Dr. Troy, Talisha, or Rachel. Again, if you have a student in this situation where they are either homeless or they are living under some pretty dire circumstances, flexibility, patience, empathy, these are all guiding things that as educators we need to be utilizing for these students. And again, those are things we should be using for all students, but especially a student that is particularly fragile in that moment. Again, I can't stress this enough, that if you find out a student is living in their car, for instance, and they, due to that, they weren't able to finish their homework because it was online on Google Classroom and they don't have internet access in their car, a little bit of leeway there would be good. Finding a way to provide for that student the opportunity to be able to finish their work and earn their points without punishment. So thinking along the lines of helpfulness rather than punitive, okay? Consistency is key here at school, and I think that we have done a fairly good job of that so far this year in terms of, under the pandemic situation. We have managed to maintain a fairly consistent daily schedule. We've been doing much of the same thing for the majority of the year, save for that 1 week there at the beginning that we ended up having to call off for e-learning. So that consistency, predictability, that's a big thing, especially for students who do not have that in any other aspect of their life, okay? And again, I brought this up earlier regarding relationships and trust. Here at the beginning of the second 9 weeks of the school year, for the majority of your students, you have been able to build that up at this point. And so this is about the time of the year where students start trusting us enough to share things that maybe they didn't want to share before, or might be embarrassing, or that they might think we might judge them for. So Again, if a student reaches out to you, please offer them the opportunity to be able to share. And again, if you are uncomfortable or a situation is too far out of your comfort zone, please pull one of us into the situation so that we can help you and support you. Okay? Again, your district McKinney Vento liaison is Sherry Kripe. She has been here for a little while now, so I know last year she was a new face to the people in the district, but for this year, she should be a familiar face for most of us. And so please don't hesitate to reach out to her if you have questions or concerns. If you do, or you find her intimidating, or whatever the reason may be, if you would rather work through one of us at the administration staff to be able to contact her on your behalf, I can speak for myself that I am happy to do so. So again, it comes back to that, please remember to share as much as you have noticed with us so that we can go from there and kind of pick it up and run with it, okay? Ensuring transportation daily to and from school. This is not necessarily a teacher concern, but it is something that you need to be aware of, that any student who is currently registered in our school system has to have a plan for reasonable transportation to and from school. I'll leave it at that for now, but if you know of a student who is not coming to school because they cannot get here due to a car issue, something along those lines, please bring that to our attention so that we can work with that family to figure out a solution. So this is kind of a list of things that have already been shared throughout the presentation, just kind of really important bullet points. So I will move ahead. So action steps, obviously, anytime you're looking at a problem, you've got things that you need to deal with right away, things that need to be dealt with within the next day or two, and then things for long-term, looking ahead, how can we make this better in the long run? Obviously, homelessness is not something that can be fixed in 30 minutes with a quick little conversation in the hallway. So, in the immediate, if you're concerned about them, they share something with you, please be kind and empathetic and warm and let them know that, you deeply care for them and that you are going to get people involved who can help them, not judge them or punish them or anything like that. Short-term wise, that would fall on the majority of us in the administration and your McKinney Vento liaison, aka Sherry Kripe. So that would be in terms of if we find out that a student is homeless, what can we do in the immediate first few days in order to find a safe place for that student to be, and what can we provide for that family. And then long-term goals are obviously how can we best support that student both academically and social emotional wise as they transition into whatever that long-term goal is, whether it be staying in the community, moving on to a different community with a different family member that has a better, safer place, whatever that situation is. Okay, so what I wanted you to do is the last couple of slides of this presentation are covering different scenarios of things that could very, very easily happen. And in fact, many of these sound very familiar to me, whether it's at Elwood or previous schools I've worked for, just to kind of make sure that you're on the right path of what would you do if this was the scenario that you were dealing with, okay? So there is scenario 1, there is a scenario 2, and a 3, okay? And again, if you find that there is something that you have a question about, and for whatever reason you don't really want to bring it to either myself, Dr. Troy, Sherry Kripe, or anybody in this building, there are 2 people that work with the IDOE who work regularly with this situation, and that is Gina Woodard. She is actually the homeless education specialist with the DOE, so she would definitely be your first go-to with questions. And then Adam Pitt has recently taken over from Valerie Beard as the Assistant Director of EL and Migrant Education Programs. With Red Gold here in town, we do have a handful of migrant families who come in and out of the school district throughout the year, and sometimes they are not living in the best situation while their students are here. So he is also an excellent source of information. Okay. All right. So we have come to the end of the presentation. Hopefully I did not take forever. I can't see my timer right now while I'm recording. So that being said, hopefully I did not take up too much of your time. This was a state mandated required training. So I will have a sign-up sheet in my office. Please, once you finish this presentation, I need you to come to my office at some point and please sign your name that you have completed the required McKinney Vento professional development for this school year 2021. Okay? If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. Just drop me a quick email and I will get back to you as soon as possible. And otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.